because I'll tell you something weird, mate. Even though this year there have been a lot of episodes where we were really negative, like down on teams, stuff like that, I have to say, as much as like on some of the insight, I did still basically predict everyone except G2 was probably not even going to win a fucking game at Worlds, like against the good teams. So in a way, I'm on a downer. But actually, I have to say, the way the finals weekend went, actually, I thought was quite positive. Like, I actually thought overall, in a way, G2 did restore a bit of my faith that they are like way better and they might be able to have the odd game they can win. I also actually thought even Fnatic had some positive signs once we get into some of the players of sort of like some light in the dark. I mean, fucking Humanoid actually started playing League of Legends, you know, like, what did you think though? What was your general sense of the weekend? Because basically coming into it, partly because of the format of the having to wait every week for 2 matches, I did kind of feel like it was killing my like sort of vibe at the end of the season. And I was really worried that G2 was going to beat everyone, but do it in such a shitty way that actually I sort of wouldn't even believe in them. But I think at the end, they sort of saved it for me. Like, I kind of do feel like at the end, they did look really good to me at times.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the main thing that I was happy with G2 is that they didn't have that one like awful game. The one game that they lost, it's not like they just played fucking terribly. I mean, it just felt like, you know, maybe the Sivir wasn't the strongest pick there. It didn't, you know, get to the point where it's able to carry the game. And like Yone is a relatively risky champion in competitive play. So they didn't have that like awful draft, and they didn't have any of the games that they were having before where even though they won, it looks like they should have lost. Like, those are the games that I really hate, are the ones where it's like, oh, you only won because this other team sucks.
Yes.
It's not that like you're actually a dominant team. So at least in their 3 wins, I think they looked good. Like they were competent. There were some like areas that were not clean, but at least they put the whole game together. You know, like they were able to get an early lead in most of the games. They're able to out skirmish, which has always been their biggest strength. If you go back to Winter, that was what you looked at G2 for. It was for the fact that they knew how to, you know, get leads and carry on the leads. And then, you know, by the last game, it felt like they just put everything together. I mean, they were just playing like the best team, and they deserved to win.
No, I thought they actually just had a fabulous final. Like, even though there's the one game, like you say, people are going to think like, oh, it's just classic G2. They just ran it down. I actually agree with you. Like, first of all, it was a close game. I mean, they still just needed one big team fight to win the whole game. Secondly, that was actually like it makes sense that G2 lost that one, dude. That was like easily the best start of the game for Fnatic. They looked fucking great in that one. Like, that actually was like the dream start for them. And if anything, that I'll actually spin it the other way, Dom. How most people probably perceive that. I'm with you. First of all, I thought the Yone pick, it's a bit of a reach anyway, and actually Craps did quite well on it. And then secondly, if you actually look at that game, here's how I would characterize this. That it actually makes G2 even more scary to me. Because if you look at this final, right, here's how this final went. When you had the first games that G2 just gets the mega early start, the game's over. Like, you just can't get back in the game if you're Fnatic. Then if you have this game, the third game, that's basically where finally Fnatic gets the nice start and they win the game. But even then, G2's in the game and has a chance to win. Then on the last game, you actually have an even early game, and then it's just G2 winning. Like, at that point in time, like, does G2 essentially, can G2 only lose if they get mega far behind early? Like, that makes them look unbeatable, Dom. And we're saying it's not even like it's their strongest draft. Like, they're obviously experimenting with what they do in the draft. And there's another thing, mate. Their draft control by the time we got to this final, like, they just made these other teams look stupid, mate. It was bad enough some of the stuff before with like the blind Braum picks. But like, Mickey X isn't even just doing this conditioning. He can actually just pick that fucking Lysandra and it's good. It's actually just good. Yeah. Like, no one else plays him. It's just good when he picks it. Like, they just look mega G2.
Yeah, he just picks it into Rakan. Like, that's what he's looking for. He's looking for specific matchups where he can actually, you know, make do with the champion. I think that the other thing about that game 3 that should be considered is like how strong Fnatic's draft is. If you just think about how good these champions are in each role, right? Like, their draft is Renekton, one of the best top laners, if not like the best top laner right now. Maokai, been one of the best junglers, probably second in prio next to Ivern right now in the jungle. Azir, top tier pick, and then Kai'Sa Nautilus is their bot lane. Like, they had insane champions. And then also, if you look at G2's side of things, they have Rakan, who is, you know, really susceptible to point and click CC. And like we just said, they have a Maokai, Renekton, and Nautilus on the other team. So it's very hard for the Rakan to actually have a lot of value here. And Yone is also susceptible to the same point and click CC that Fnatic has a lot of like on their team comp. So that's a game where I think like you're gonna end up in certain situations where you do get out drafted. And if you lose that game but you make it competitive, it doesn't weigh on me the same way as like the Eve game or the Fiddle game from, you know, the previous series that we saw them play. So I just wanted to like round that out because, you know, like this is just one of those things where if you do like, you know, try to go deep into a draft and an enemy team is smart and they understand exactly what your win conditions are, what you like to play, Fnatic banned out the Kalista, the Kog'Maw, and the Draven, 3 of Hans's best champions, and like the Sivir pick just wasn't that useful in this game. I think that this is an acceptable game to lose. Like that's a different game to me than the ones they were losing before, is my main point.
Yes. So like I say, I actually come out of this. I'm feeling pretty good about G2. I even think in this final, mate, you could make a case every single player played well. Like, I don't think anyone really had, like, more than one bad game, or even then, like, barely one bad game. Like, Broken Blade looked awesome in the first few games. Caps was good throughout all the games, too, even on the one they lost. Yike, actually, I thought one of his best series of the year. He looked awesome. Like, he had some great moves he pulled. And Mickey X was great. Maybe not as awesome as he was at other times, but he certainly had some very good early games. And Hans Sama, I mean, even did he play the Draven to close the series? Like, what? You couldn't really ask for more from G2, but I thought they looked great. Everything looked awesome. Coaching staff, players.
I was a little bit down on Hans Sama, if I'm being honest. I didn't like how he played in game 1, for example. It felt like he was dying way too much in that game. Game 2, I mean, he ended up with like 10 kills. Everyone's going to see a 10-0 scoreline and be like, oh my God, he popped off. But really, like, the whole team was just smurfing on them. Like, they were just so far ahead that he was just the recipient of the kills. And in the final Draven game, like, he made a pretty crucial mistake when he, over chased to try to kill the Xayah. Ivern was there, died, like lost his, I believe he lost his sums. He obviously lost his life and his stacks at that point. So I think that like Hans didn't have the best series, but everyone else looked, like they looked like they were all just on form.
Also, like I say, let me think. What was I going to ask on this question? Oh, that's right. I actually have a question about champ balance for you, which is, right, mate, it was bad enough when we had that other match where it was like the Mad Lions versus G2 one, and then Broken Blade just smurfed on fucking Chasey with Cassante. I want to ask you, is that champion actually broken? Because there's that moment in, I think it was game 1 even, where Noah on Aphelios, I think he did, there's even like a tower hit had gone on the Cassante. He just gets 1v1 by Broken. You know the one I'm on about, where Noah tried to flash over him and just got complete.
Where Noah just stood there and auto-attacked?
Like, if people don't know, I think Noah had like 2 kills at this point in time, like a little bit fed. The Cassante had 0 kills. It was up in levels, I will say, so it like, had farm or whatever, but like, should it really be able to like 1v1 like that? The top player with no kills?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's like how top lane. I think that's
it was early enough in the game, but just
I mean, almost like any like that kill doesn't bother me that much about Cassante. I mean, I think the thing that bothers me about Cassante is like the amount of mobility that he has as a tank. Like, it seems really absurd if somebody is good at using their like WE Q3 flash, and then you get the W reset once you ult. It just seems like really oppressive to have that amount of mobility, and it's really hard to lock him down, obviously, because he has 2 unstoppables essentially in his kit. But I mean, like those types of kills, I mean, I just expect that to happen. I mean, if you're an AD carry and you end up in a 1v1 situation with a top laner and you're down levels, you should just lose to like all the top laners, in my opinion. You should lose to Aurelia, Camille, Jax, Cassante, Renekton. Like, if you don't lose to those champions, then I feel like, top lane needs to be buffed or something, because that's what those champions are built to do. I mean, AD carries can't be the strongest in team fights and the strongest at 1v1 and like, the ones that determine like who gets Herald in pro. Like, it can't have that much agency. So I was okay with that, but I do think Cassante is like, it's definitely super strong. It is broken, but it's not like unplayable. Like I thought Wonder actually did really well in the lane phases. If Fnatic was a better team and they could use the leads that Wonder was actually getting in lane, I think that they would have had a chance to win, because Wonder was playing really well. I mean, I think he was the best performer on Fnatic for the entire series, which just says something about the class of player that he is, that he could just jump in and like and just immediately be like looking like the best or the second best top laner in the entire league. But yeah, I mean, like Cassante, if you mess up against Cassante, it's just one of those champions that will just become unkillable, ridiculous. It's just going to look like the most OP champion in the game.
Yeah, on the Wonder thing, actually, this is how I would describe it. Like, first of all, I agree with you. I actually think, like, from the beginning of the first series he played against Fnatic, against Mad Lions, he just got better and better as all the games. And by the time he got to the final, like, if you just took the nameplates off there, Dom, and just said, this is the top player that was on the second best team all year long, you would believe it. He looked good. In fact, I'd even say this just shows what a big game player he is as well. Because I made a point on some of the insight that I feel like a lot of people are going to miss, which is Oscarinin was actually one of the better players for Fnatic the last split or so, right? He actually was one of the reasons why they were good. But people are taking it for granted that like he would have done what Wonder did in this final and more. It's like, whoa. First of all, he's a rookie. He hasn't even played a whole year. And these are stage matches, guys. Like, I'm not going to say he wouldn't, but I have to see it happen before I can give him that status. I actually think low key, it actually ended up being, I mean, I'm not going to spin it into the whole topic of like, why was Wonder allowed to play? That's a separate issue. But I actually think this gave Fnatic a better chance of winning, mate, because actually Wonder did play like a fucking vet. And he played it like you want him to do. Like, he played only the champions he's really good at classically. He didn't need any resources. Mate, this is why you could have believed it was like 2 years ago. He also is like right back to like, you can't fucking dive him status. Like, there's one of those things for top laners that I think's a marker that you're a great top laner. Like, my boy Flame back in the day was amazing at this. The Shy's pretty good at it. Like, it's not just that you can carry or you can weak side. Like, if you are undivable, like some of these guys are, man, that psychologically does something to your opponent, because you can see it's like when teams start going in, as soon as the first person fucks up or gets a tower hit, you can almost see them panic, dude. You can almost see the other players like, oh shit, it's happening again, and it just happened. Like, mate, this guy's undivable. It's mental. It's actually absurd how good this guy is. I agree. I think he probably was overall the best player for Fnatic in the series, not least because like his job was, that he's saying, just lose gracefully. Whereas like people like Razork, who actually think have been pretty good, even Humanoid's good, they just were like behind every game, mate. Like Razork had a nightmare simulator in this final, mate. What the fuck?
I mean, it felt like
I think so many of these games just feel like he's behind immediately. He has no chance.
Yeah, I mean, there were hard games for him, but generally when your team is just outclassed early game as a jungler, you're gonna fall far behind. I would say the thing that was so impressive about Wonder's performance was that when a player takes a long break like this and they come back, right, and they're a veteran player, what you expect is that they're going to know how to play the game, like mid to late game. They're going to understand, like, you know, what to do, because that's the part that doesn't really go away. That's the knowledge part of the game. But the thing that you would think would be their weakness would be their lane phase. Like, how do they actually get to the point in the game where they're going to be relevant? Are they just going to be permanently behind every single game in lane because, you know, the other guy's been practicing the whole time and like Wonder wasn't even playing the game? The thing that was so impressive to me about Wonder's play was that he was just winning lane, like the actual 1v1 lane he was winning versus Broken Blade in most of the games. And it wasn't until he would try to help his team, because I mean the rest of the map is collapsing, there would be one time where he would like TP out of his lane, or they would be doing a swap and he would like have to like, burn his ult or his flash or something in order to save a situation or just try to like affect the game in some way. And after that is when BB would like get a solo kill. It wasn't like Wonder was just 1v1 dying for no reason, or he like got outplayed when he had everything up. So to me, that just shows like how comfortable he is. And then, I mean, the thing that I thought was so valuable for Fnatic is Oscar plays more of like a carry style. Like, he wants to play like Jax or GP or Rumble or like some of these types of champions. He's not the type of guy that wants to just play, you know, 4 or 5 games of Renekton Orin. And I thought that what was so good for Fnatic was the fact that Wonder made everyone's job so much easier. He's just going to play a top lane champion that's really strong in the meta, that doesn't need attention. He's going to like win his lane, and then also like he'll be ready to help the team. So you don't have to consider him in the game. It makes the game so much easier for Fnatic to just consider 2 lanes and like what needs to be done around like bot or mid, and play around there and not have to worry about like Wonder's lane at all in any of the games, which, you know, I think was a benefit to them. So obviously you can't know if Oscar would have played better than Wonder, but I'm in the same boat where I just think that like Wonder most likely performed better than Oscar would have in these situations.
I mean, that's not even, like I said, we're not even giving a diss to the Oscar guy. 1, Wonder played really well. I mean, he's made a reason he fucking won a game in this series. And then 2, it's a final on a stage for a rookie. Like, I'd have to see that happen. By the way, it's why I actually, earlier in this episode, gave props to Yike, actually. I think, bearing in mind, like, you wouldn't actually know this was the first, like, big stage match or whatever. Or, I mean, I played MSI, but you know what I mean? Like, he looked great, mate. He looked just fucking good. Had a great series in general. By the way, one thing I'll also say as well, I actually low-key hate to have to say this, though, is I have to actually say Humanoid played pretty well this weekend, mate. He played well against Mad Lions. He had some big games. He actually played well in the final here against G2. The problem I have with that is this, Dom. It's like, that isn't that cool, though. That means for really was just fucking phoning it in all year. Because basically, I've heard behind the scenes, if people don't know, the word among actual players and coaches is they all think Humanoid is good still. They just think he like can't be asked, basically, unless it's like an important match, or if it's like some sort of like a regular season game. They think if like the game goes bad, he just doesn't give a shit and sort of says, I can't be asked, or just phones it in, or just fucking hints it, or whatever. I mean, I could almost believe it's true now, Dom. If I think how he played at Worlds last year after that year, and then I see how he's playing now in the matches that count. Like, he obviously is still good. Like, mate, his Syndra games were actually fucking banging. He was having some really good games there. Like, there's so many upsides, but like, I just hate the idea that like, so what was the rest of the year then? You know what I mean? I hate that.
Yeah, I personally, I don't know how to feel about Humanoid. I think the biggest issue for me is the champ pool that he's being forced to play right now, just because of what the mid meta is, it feels like none of his like really good champions. I mean, he's trying to work in the Syndra, but I mean, obviously they lost the first 2 games when he was playing Syndra into G2. And you saw like Syndra versus Jace. As soon as Jace gets Merc Treads against like AP jungler plus Syndra, the Syndra just can't even touch him anymore. And it makes the game really unplayable. I just feel like the meta is not...
Do you think they're overforcing the Syndra? Because even though he is clearly good on it, like me, he has no fucking mobility, and he obviously has no, like, he had the fucking, it's just like teleport and flash, so he's getting banged, wasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the fact of the matter is this, like, Syndra is a champion that wants to be paired with AD junglers. Like, ideally, when Syndra has been good at periods throughout League of Legends, it's always been Syndra Lee Sin, Syndra Rek'Sai, Syndra Viego. Like, they just want an early game ganking jungler so Syndra can set it up with stuns and you can just play through like 2v2s. And right now, there's almost no AD junglers in the meta. If you look at what the meta is right now for jungle, it's Ivern, Maokai. Sejuani has a portion physical, but also gets fucked by Merc Treads, so it's another champion that just incentivizes Merc Treads, which hurts both of them. Yeah, Ivern, Rel.
Yeah, it's everything, yeah.
Rel, like, Poppy is AD, but like it also is a champion that's not the best mid ganker in the world. It's not like a damaged 2v2 mid ganker the same way like Lee Sin or Rek'Sai or one of these champions is. So when you look at the entire meta, and then you also consider like Talia is being played jungle, Karthus is being played jungle, there's just no champions that pair well with the Syndra. So even if Syndra is decent right now, which I don't really think Syndra is, I think it's just a bad time for it given what the other champions are. It seems like right now the best champions mid lane are, you know, Azir, things that are self-sufficient, Tristana, LeBlanc. Like, you just kind of want something with mobility mid that's going to be self-sufficient and just show up later in team fights and be, you know, useful.
Yes. By the way, I also agree that you didn't throw in Jace there, because like at this point in time, Jace is like fucking what Nidalee jungle was like 3 years ago. It's like, if you're the best in the world, it's the sickest shit ever. If you're not,
don't even
play it. Don't even play it. You won't even be able to do any of this shit. So don't waste our time. So I'm with you on that.
Yeah, I mean, Caps played a pretty good Jace game, but
yeah,
I think it's like it's just not I wouldn't say it's a power pick in EU or NA right now. It's something where, like, if the draft sets up for it and like you have a Maokai Jace angle and it's really free and it's good for the game, pick it. But it's not the same way that it is in China and Korea, where it's like, oh, Jace is up, we pick Jace like 1-2 no matter what. Like, it's not that level of champion. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, when I think of Humanoid, the 2 champions that I always thought he was exceptional on were Orianna and Victor, and neither of those champions are in the meta right now. And, you know, control mages, like, they're just playing different. Like, if you think about what Azir is now, Azir is not a lane dominant champion. I felt like that was Humanoid's big strength, is that he would take control mage versus control mage matchups and then just be dominating like both sides of the matchup. He'd be up 10, 20 CS in 1v1s versus other players that were good at like control mages. Like, for example, the final that he had versus Larson in 2021 spring. Like, that was one where like the first 2 games were all about, you know, like Humanoid's just lane prowess at that point. So yeah, I just think that right now, like the way the champions interact, I just don't think he gets that much value. He's always been kind of spotty when it comes to team fights. Like, sometimes he team fights well, sometimes he dies early, sometimes he goes for a play that like isn't really there. But his laning phase was the key to, you know, his dominance in like the era where he was really, really good. So it just seems like there's a combination of things that make it, you know, not like make it so he can't really show how good he really is. And one of those things is the meta.
Because I actually low-key think that when people watch this final, I don't even think Fnatic played that bad, mate. Like, they had some moments that clearly weren't as good. Like, essentially for me, they were just completely, what you would say in like sports cup, they were covered. Like, every single strength they had, G2's better at than them. Like, for example, they tried on some games, you could tell, Dom, after the first game, they tried to, like, accelerate early and go for some players. Almost never fucking worked. Their players backfire. They get killed themselves. They get it turned on them. Like, the joke is, if you want to see, like, how hard it is to play G2, watch the fucking Mad Lions series of Fnatic. Like, Trimby's fucking smurfing on him, mate. He looks awesome in that one. His fucking Alistair looks beasting. Then when he tries it against G2, it's like, it's nothing. Like, if anything, he's the one getting killed if he goes for a play. He's the one getting turned on. Like, that just shows how the gap there, because Mickey's just too fucking cracked. Fucking Humanoid was all right, but Capsules had a really good series. And like I said about the junglers, Rajcula could never get a game, mate. He had like, one game that was like reasonable start, because he's always back. Like, he's got lanes that are behind, and fucking Yike outplays him, and like it's fucking ahead early in the game, and they get kills. Like, I don't know what more people want Fnatic to do. And then lastly, like, Fnatic is all split long. One thing I've been impressed with is they actually do like go in together, mate. this G2 team, they showed it in this final. They're probably easily the best team at re-engage. Like their fucking timing of when to pursue a fight, when to like turn a fight. They're too good, mate. Like I watched this final. I wasn't even hating up for that. I was actually like, you were all right. You were all right in this final for me.
I mean, I think that Fnatic just capped out. When you think about all their other series, like they showed everything, right? Like they had to play extra series and they just showed everything they had. They had the Talia and the Karthus pick. People figured out that the Karthus can only be paired with Tristana, so Tristana is banned against them. They don't have the whole arsenal of AD carry champions that G2 has. Like G2, like if they end up in a world with a bunch of AD carry bans and there's no Xayah, Kai'Sa, all this stuff, then it's going to be advantage G2 because G2 can play the Kog'Maw, they can play the Kalista, they can play the Draven, and if you ban all those champions, that means that other OP champions for G2 are going to be left up. So I think that Fnatic just got figured out, and by the end, they just had nothing left. Like, what other champions could they pick? Syndra, they tried, didn't end up working. Like, they had already shown their prio on Renekton, so like if they're getting it in the series, it's not going to be paired with something really OP. The Talia is being put into like suboptimal situations because obviously G2 knows that Fnatic likes Talia so much. And yeah, I mean, just overall, like they just aren't as good on the super strong meta champions as G2 are. So Fnatic just, it felt like by the end, it's like, that's the advantage. People always say, what's the advantage from going from winning the winner's bracket or like winning the winner final? Like you don't get to get double elimination. Everyone else gets double elimination. Like this is the advantage theoretically, is that you get to watch another team play extra series. And when they play all these extra series, you should be able to take away something about like what their prios really are if they are challenged. I mean, obviously, if it's just them stomping a team that's inferior to them 3-0, you're not going to get much out of that. But it felt like G2 really had Fnatic downloaded by this final, and they understood not just what Fnatic plays, but when they could give really strong champions that Fnatic really likes, in what context they could actually let those champions through. Because it felt like a lot of other teams were just like, fuck it, we don't want to deal with it, we'll just ban those champions. But the way that G2 actually brought it back was they gave the champions that Fnatic was good at to them, but in situations where those champions wouldn't be very effective. And then Fnatic is stuck between, do we play what we're like winning on, or that like the champions that we really like, or do we just have to like, you know, leave those champions up and play things that we're worse at, and try to just like have a better theoretical draft.
Like the one player I do think did have some problems was, I do think like Trimby did have some ints though. He had a few where like sort of went for a player that I think he had a little bit of choke in him, mate. It wasn't egregious, but he had some deaths that were a bit off.
I mean, he had like a 9 or 10 death game in there. Like it was.
He'd had a few that were bad ones. He had some bad ones. I definitely agree on the point about like essentially like Dylan Falco has always been good at drafting. Like if people don't know, spoiler, I might have some content on this future. You'll actually find out that some of the teams where he looked like he was draft capped, it was certain players not being able to play stuff. But in this version of G2, not only has he already done an awesome job all year long and all split long, like you're saying, bro, he's played 8 games in the upper bracket. They had to play 15 Fnatic before they reached the final. Like, that's outrageous, dude. Almost twice as many games. Like, at that point, like, Fnatic already had a worse draft. Like, as you say, you're going to be completely figured out. Like, you've essentially shown every variation. I mean, when you were saying even then that, like, essentially you knew what the G2 can play that, like, Fnatic can't. Like, you think it's not in fucking Fnatic's head when they have to do, like, a Kalista ban. Like, that Kazi just fucking ass-wrecked them in that fucking previous series. Of course it is. Like you say, everything had been seen.
See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, you know, be a pleb and don't.